Okay, hi guys again. This video is gonna be about interview season, and I'm honestly a lot more excited about this video than the previous one because the content is fun. At least for me, it's like relatively more like interesting to talk about. And okay, so just before I jump into interview season, I wanna add 2 points to the previous video. I went through it and I realized that I kind of skipped these two important points. One was that I didn't tell you guys what NRMP is. So NRMP is the National Residency Matching Process. It's again, so this is the third entity that you're gonna encounter during your path, and their job, they basically came up with this algorithm, the matching algorithm, and I'll talk about the matching algorithm in the next video because it's post interview. But you just need to know that when you sign a contract, you sign that with NRMP, and because NRMP, like if you certify your rank order list on the NRMP website, which is by the way a separate entity as opposed to ERAS, you are in a binding contract with NRMP because you can't just enroll for the match process and then if you match into a program and like I don't like this program, so I'm not going to do my residency here. You sign a contract with them. So, and they're the guys who came up with the algorithm. So you don't have to deal much with NRMP. All you need to do is you need to log on to their website on a particular date, which was we basically had to do it before Feb 26. It starts on September 15, and you prepare a list on the NRMP website, and then you certify that list. That's, you don't have to deal with NRMP in any other way. And then they send you an email because you've entered your email address on March 15th. Your email comes through NRMP, and then your result where you've matched also comes to NRMP, and that's all you're going to be interacting with NRMP. So that's about NRMP. That was one thing that I wanted to talk about, which I felt like I forgot in the previous video. And then the second thing, even though the previous video was on the application, I forgot to talk about the application by itself. And that is important because that's the main document that programs look at. I spoke about the additional documents that you get to upload, but I didn't talk about the application. So the application is like when you go on to ERAS, you have like a proforma that you fill in. So you can fill in, like I told you, your demographic details, and then after that, you can fill in three aspects onto it. There's a predetermined template that you just fill in your details, and then it auto generates a application for you, and it also you can auto generate a CV. Now, some programs take a look at your application, some programs take a look at your CV. I've shared both my documents with you all in the email. So take a look at the difference in the format. It's pretty much almost the same. It's just that I think the application has a few additional points as opposed to a CV, like for example, reason for leaving. Okay, so I'll come to that. So I did a lot of research on this, and I came to the conclusion that in your application or CV, I'm just going to talk about it as application. CV is just a different format. It's basically the same thing with a few minute differences. You can take a look at it, but so ideally you can fill in three categories. One would be your work experience, one is your research experience, and then it's volunteer experience. And the general notion is that it should be 432. And what I mean to say is you should be filling in a maximum of 4 work experiences, 3 research experiences, and 2 volunteer experiences. So I think I did follow that format. I think I may have gone 433 if I'm not mistaken, but doesn't matter. You have the document with you, so you can go through it. So 4 work experiences. What are work experiences? All your clinical rotations count as work experience. So if you've done an observership, you describe it as a work experience. If you've done a clerkship, it's a work experience. If you've even worked in, like I worked in Bangalore, so I put that as my work experience. Research experience doesn't necessarily just mean say a job as a research assistant or a research fellow, because even if you publish a paper, that counts as a research experience. And I have described in my CV and in the application how to describe your publication as a research experience. So take a look at that. Make sure it's in point format, and this takes a lot of time. And also, you got to start this at in the beginning of August, and then work your way through. And it takes a lot of time. I clearly remember, in fact. Um Venkatesh, I don't know if you're from Rama, you guys know him, but the two of us, Venki and me, uh, used to proofread this application where we would read one line for at least 5 to 7 minutes and pause and see if every single sentence is right and if it's grammatically right. I use Grammarly, so look up Grammarly, and you can use that while filling in your descriptions. But because they don't take a look at your application for more than 2 or 3 minutes, and I knew the importance each word and each sentence of my on my application and my CV had. So make sure that it's foolproof, and you don't describe it in more than 4 to 5 lines. Make sure it's in point wise, and have one heading on the top and then 4 points to describe, and make try to make it very personal. For example, I worked as a emergency medical officer in a corporate hospital here, and to describe it, if you have to describe your duties, try to make it personal. For example, I saw cases of gastritis, I saw cases of reflux, I saw cases of mild asthma, which I managed independently, and I also encountered cases of myocardial infarction, which I handle with help of on-call consultants. So describe what you did in that position as opposed to what any emergency medical officer would do. They're different things. Like, don't just say saw cases in the ER, managed cases in the ICU. Tell them what you did. Like, if you saw a case of sepsis in the ICU, septic shock, that you manage with the help of like a intensivist, mention that I helped the intensivist with procedures such as central lines, and you got to make it very personal again. So your description, that's how you can work about it. Look up some videos, read some blogs, take a look at my CV, take a look at other the CVs of your seniors, and then draft your own CV, because that's how I did it, and it takes a lot of time. So yeah. So at the end of it, like, you will have an application with your work experience, research experience, and volunteer experience, and at the same time, you have to describe your hobbies and interests and awards. Now, awards again would be your medical school awards, and it'll be other awards as a whole. So when you're describing a hobby, uh, don't just say, like, if you look at mine, firstly try to make it as unique as possible and try to stand out. I remember the program director in one of my programs told me that my hobbies and interests stood out, and my entire interview with him was on my hobbies and interests. And so I don't know, I can only tell you that I would have written it, differently, at least, if not right. But for it to actually catch someone's attention, and that's all he wanted to speak to me about. So, for example, if you're describing traveling, like if you look at my application, I mentioned that I've not just mentioned that my hobby is to travel, but I've mentioned that I like to backpack. I like to, and I have traveled to these many countries and these many continents and these many cities and states or whatever. Make it descriptive, and tell them what you've done with that as it being your hobby. Like, if it's like cooking, then say I like to cook Indian food, or I like to cook healthy food, or like I like to cook this particular dish or whatever. Like, make it descriptive and make it unique, so that they can, just saying cooking isn't gonna catch anyone's attention, because like there'll be 100 or 200 other people, maybe 1,000 people who've mentioned cooking as their hobby, and you got to stand out in that regard. If you're describing medical school awards, it can be anything. It could be if you won any singing competitions, dancing competitions, I don't know, and other awards. You can just this is where you have to glorify yourself, but do be prepared to defend yourself, not defend your, explain yourself rather, like, because the last thing you would want is to put something on your CV which you've overly glorified, and then you don't when they speak to you about it in the program, they're like, huh, what the hell is this, like, it's nothing significant. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is that don't overdo it as well, but also try to like hit the right balance. Yeah, so that's about your application and NRMP. So now let's get talking about interview season. My intention now is to paint a picture in your head as to what interview season is like, and what I learned from it, and what you should be doing, and more importantly, what you shouldn't be doing, I would say. So, interview season starts on September 15th, technically. Technically, programs get to look at your applications on September 15th. Now, there are a few people who say that interview season lasts for, rather, is divided into 3 phases, and this is not some accurate or technical, it's not a hard and fast rule, and no one has ever documented or published an article saying that interview season is divided into these 3 phases. But in general, it is from September and October, November and December, and then January and February. So they divided into these 3 phases. And the reason they do this is because they say that in September and October, it's mainly candidates who are US citizens, American grads, US citizens, green card holders, and people with very high scores and really good CVs who get interview invites. They say November, December is when you should be expecting, rather, any non-US IMG would get more number of interviews during November, December period, and Jan and Feb is when these AMGs and US citizens, if say they have like 30-40 interviews, or like they have a lot of interviews, they start canceling their interviews with a lot of programs which they don't want to really interview at and go at, because they have like multiple other choices. So those programs start getting cancellations, and then they start giving those cancellation invites to us. Yeah, I mean, we get rejected invites, whatever, but an invite is an invite. So, but this is not what I experience at all during interview season, because I don't know, and whether people experience it in this particular way, non-US IMGs or not, it's really subjective. And because for me, I got my first interview invite on September 24th, and that was extremely early, and I don't know, and it boosted my confidence to a whole different level, because I got that invite from SUNY, and it was a very well-known and reputed university program, and I got it on September 24th, and even I was shocked, and everybody around me was shocked. But it's not like after that I got a flood, I didn't get like some 30 interviews after that, or not even 10 interviews. But what I'm trying to say is that it's a very variable process, so you're gonna have a unique experience as a whole. So stop comparing yourself to people in the past. Like, don't compare yourself to me or to any of your seniors, and don't compare yourself to each other, because everyone has a unique experience. Someone might get one interview in October and then not get interviews for the rest of the season. Someone might not get anything till December and then get 5 interviews in Jan. So what I'm trying to say is that it's a unique experience, and don't have predetermined notions about interview season. It's extremely random. You might get an interview at any time. So yeah, the reason why I'm making a mention of this here is because a lot of my mind space, headspace during interview season went in, when am I supposed to be getting interviews? Why am I not getting interviews now? How did this person get interview? That person got interview. I didn't get an interview. Whatever. And am I going to get interviews in Jan? Am I going to get interviews in November? I kept breaking my head over these issues, and all I can tell you is that be patient, and trust me, there will be no other phase in your entire life where you're going to be checking your phone more than interview season. So make sure you always are in a place where you have internet, and your phone is hooked onto your Gmail account, and your Gmail account is active with notifications, because you get interviews through email notifications. Okay, so anyway, coming back to how interview season is, Uh, Once you submit your application on September 15th, it's a waiting game after that, and you should be. It's not that you can just sit back, relax, and chill. You should be preparing for interviews. And how do you prepare for interviews? One is, firstly, you gotta familiarize yourself with interviews, how they are conducted, what they're looking for, and like in general. You should have the most commonly asked questions in interviews and prepare answers to them. And once you've done this as your first step, the second step would be to rehearse and to practice. And practice makes perfect. And it is well, if you speak to someone who has practiced, you can tell that this person is doing far better than someone who's trying to wing an interview. Because if I ask you this question, for example, now tell me about yourself, you're gonna like stammer, stutter, you're gonna tell me things you don't want to tell me, you're gonna tell me, you're not gonna have a well crafted answer. But if you have rehearsed this, and it's almost, in every interview you're gonna get asked this question, like, tell me about yourself. So that's a good question to prepare for. Why the US? So there's a document that's shared which has the most commonly asked questions. On the Match 2020 forum, they have a drive folder. Just type in on the search bar interview prep, and you'll get this drive folder. And then they've segregated into behavioral questions, into technical questions, personal questions, ethical situations, and then informal questions. So you can prepare, and then it's a lot of fun. You can speak to like how you have study partners. I mean, I'm still in touch with my interview prep partners, and there's this guy from Connecticut. There's someone from Dubai. It's nice. You make friends, and then you can practice with them, and it's very interesting to see when to put yourself in the interviewer's position and to see how someone else is answering, and then you learn, okay, this is not how I'm supposed to be doing it, and this is this guy seems like he's being too monotonous. He's talking in monologues. You what I'm trying to say is, you will learn about how to interview from someone else when you are interviewing them, and at the same time you should be rehearsing your answers with them. And then at the end of it, have like a mock session. I had a mock session before every single interview that I went for. So before I went for the interview, the previous night, it was like a Skype call, and I would just to get into get into the groove of it, and to get comfortable talking about yourself. So rehearse it. I cannot emphasize this enough, that you should be practicing for interviews. And there is a book by the program director of Mount Sinai on interview like tips. So that's also on the Match forum. So look that up as well, and download the book. It takes about 3 to 4 hours to read the entire book, and they were good. Like it had good information in it, and I think I learned, like, I can't really tell you what I learned from where now, but like I did learn a lot from that book as well. So how do you get interviews now? Like, so I mean, what I'm trying to say is you should be preparing for interviews, but obviously the question is going to come into your head: how do you get interviews? So it's that ERAS I mentioned in the previous video has an interview section by itself. So there are some programs that choose ERAS as a medium to extend interview invites, and it usually comes as secure messages. So on your email, if you get a notification saying you have received a secure message, and ERAS wants to send you a secure message, then just jump, cry, hug someone, scream, I don't know, but that basically means that you've got an interview. So that's how I got my interview, by the way. My first interview, it was through ERAS, and I didn't even know what it meant. I just got an email saying ERAS wants to send you a secure message, and I'm like, what is this? And then it was my first interview invite. But not all programs choose ERAS as the medium. They have third parties, so that comes as external emails. For example, there are it's called Third Friday and Thalamus. They're like brokers. They're called interview brokers, and I don't know what's the advantage of them or disadvantage of them, but just know that some programs choose other platforms to extend interview invites. And so you would usually get an email, and then there would be different slots that you can reserve And always choose, like, as soon as you get an email, make sure that you pick a slot, because slots get done really quickly. They send out interview invites as batches, and everyone is like ready to pounce on those slots. So make, because the last thing you would want is to have like an overlap of two interviews, and or you would like you would have some, you would be in Texas and you have to go to like New York, and like it might be like 1 or 2 days. It happened to me, by the way, when I had like 1 day gap between two of my interviews, and it was beyond my control, because by the time I looked up the slots, I had just like one slot available, which was like 2 days of, it was like Wednesday was my interview in Scranton, and then on Friday the slot was available. So I took it. I mean, the other option was to be on a wait list, which is a risk by itself. So what I'm trying to say is that as soon as you get an email from ERAS or from an interview broker, pick a slot and book your interview date. And a lot of times, so some programs have pre-interview dinners. I'll talk about that by itself, like what pre-interview dinners are. But yeah, so in general, just expect to get not just interviews via emails, but also expect rejections. A lot of programs will send out rejections, not all of them, but a lot of them send out rejections, and it's very normal. The first few will hurt you. You'll feel bad about yourself. You'll feel like as though you're inadequate, and some of them are nicely written rejections. Some of them are brutal. So it's just a part of the game, and by the end of it, I mean, I think I got like some 70 rejections or something, and I'm just like, okay, every day I would get up, and it's like you'll be sleeping, you'll get up, the first thing you'll want to do is check your phone if you've got an interview, and you'll see a rejection. So it's a normal part of the game, and be prepared for it. That's why I'm mentioning it here, because don't think that you're getting rejections is something wrong with your application. And even if you get like, sometimes I know people who got only rejections initially and then suddenly got an interview like later in December, so they felt like crap. But it's a normal thing to happen. So yeah. Okay, so coming to the interview now I want to talk about what I want to paint a picture as to what an interview is like, and how at least they're conducted, and what are the different types of interviews. And I think I did have a decent amount of experience to tell you that these are the main type of interviews. It's unlikely that you will experience something out of what I'm going to be telling you as part of interview season. So some programs have pre-interview dinners and some don't. Who chooses to have interview dinners and who chooses against it? There's no hard and fast rule. And does it mean that if a program has a pre-interview dinner that it's a better program than one that doesn't? I don't know, and I don't think so. And honestly, see, programs in New York, for example, they don't ever have interview dinners. So it doesn't necessarily mean that programs in I mean New York City doesn't necessarily mean that New York City programs are bad programs. It's just that it's too expensive to host like 300 or 400 people for dinner in New York City. This is what people talk, and this is what I've heard. So I had 3 pre-interview dinners. In total, I had got 6 interviews. I'm going to only talk about like what I think I learned from interview season. But a pre-interview dinner is more for you to learn about the program, and for you to speak to residents, and for you to get to know like what the program is like, what the life of a resident is like. And it is a semi-formal dinner, I would say. I wore a coat, a shirt, and a pant, and the first interview dinner that I went for was again SUNY. It was my first interview invite, I scheduled it to be my first interview. And the funny thing about this was almost 70 to 75% of the applicants for at this dinner were medical students of SUNY. So they were already like they already knew everything about the program, and two, they didn't care much about the interview dinner, because they already know everything about the program, and they know that they have like a significant advantage over any other applicant coming from outside. So a lot of them came in casuals, and I was confused, because this was my first pre-interview dinner, and I was like wearing a nice jacket with like a nice formal shirt, and then I see the other applicants coming in like a shirt tucked out and jeans and like casual shoes. But yeah, it's always better to be overdressed than underdressed. So I would say wear something smart, wear something semi formal, not semi casual, semi formal. Like it should be like business attire, but don't like necessarily wear like a full suit with like. I'm talking only about guys, by the way. Like if you're a girl, then I don't know, fashion advice you're gonna have to look up on Facebook. But so I'm just trying to bring out the to tell you that it's a semi-formal occasion, and you can still ask a resident questions which are not formal. Like you can ask them like, what do you do with your money? How do you save your money? Like you can go directly and ask them. It's not like they're gonna judge you, because it'll in fact show your reflection as you're interested. Don't necessarily ask them what do you do with your money, but I'm just telling you that you can ask them anything and everything. Is this area safe? Because a lot of times you would want to know all of this, and you shouldn't be asking all these questions during your interview. So ask anything and everything that you want to know about the program, which is one, not on their website, and two, could be something that you genuinely want to know. Asking stupid questions like what is the salary, which is already on the website, or like asking questions like if you have like a board pass rate on the website, and then you go and ask the resident what's your board pass rate, it just reflects that you've not even read up their website and you've not gone prepared at all. So ask them genuine questions. Ask them what do they do in their free time. Ask them if there's like wellness programs, what's the scene with research, what do residents do after they graduate, and what they particularly liked about the program. You can ask them and don't make it seem like, a lot of times at these pre-interview dinners, I also noticed it, and it's like comical, like how we make memes on issues. You'll see people asking questions like as though they've rehearsed it, and it's very evident they've rehearsed it, and they ask the most generic questions, like for example, what do you do in your free time? Like they'll ask it in such a way like as though they're prepared to come ask that question just for the sake of asking it, and when the resident gives an answer, they'll be like, oh, and then they just shut up. And it's like as though they didn't even want to know the answer, they just wanted to ask a question. So don't do that. Be genuine. And because I'm telling you this, and this was something I started realizing as interview season kept progressing, that it's very easy to tell if someone is being genuine in themselves, and if they're trying to be somebody else, and they're trying to be the host or whatever. So be yourself during interviews, and more so interview dinners, because it's for you. And the big question now, do they grade you in interview dinners? Like, are they like really looking at you and giving feedback to the program director? It's a subjective thing, because at SUNY definitely they gave feedback, and this is because I was staying with a resident there, and she told me that they give feedback, and they told me it's more positive feedback, more negative feedback. Rather, what she was trying to tell me is that they try to rule out certain candidates in the pre-interview dinner, as opposed to rule in. So it's not like if you do well during the pre-interview dinner, you get plus points, but if you do something really stupid, then you will definitely, it will reach the program director. Like the residents do speak about this in a meeting after your interview. At Wright, the program that I matched at, it had a pre-interview dinner, so that was at Hilton, and I was super impressed right from the start, because I don't know, I just felt like the hotel where they hosted us for pre-interview dinners was a really nice one. But the residents, they had clinic duty the next day, and they were nowhere to be seen during my interview. So I don't really know how or whether they gave feedback, and they told me that they don't give feedback here. And also the residents who were at the pre-interview dinner was friends with the resident I was staying with, and a senior of mine is in this program, and he was friends with them, and he told me that they don't give feedback. So again, it depends on the program, but just be yourself and be prepared for the worst always. So that's about what pre-interview dinners are like. And there is alcohol involved in it, and if you wanna drink, you can drink. Don't binge and like do shots and shit, but just like have like a couple of beers if everyone is drinking. If no one's drinking, then don't drink, but don't think too much and break your head over it. It's a casual event, because if everyone's drinking and then you don't drink, then it can also come across as though you're like boring, and they want to see if you're gonna fit in, and like you shouldn't come across as though you're not gonna fit in. So and you're not deceptive. Just don't overthink. That's all I'm saying. Just go with the flow and see what the mood's like. Okay, so I've spoken a lot about interview dinners. Let's get to interview day. What interview day is like, and what you should be doing in particular. Interview day starts usually very early. Sometimes programs choose it to start midday or like afternoon. Usually, like you'll have different slots and you can pick your times. I would pick. For example, one of my interview was at 7, so I'll go with how that interview went. So it starts off with you reaching the department, the internal medicine department, and then you would be seated with like a lot of other candidates who are also interviewing, and you will have like one or two residents over there who are in charge of making sure things go smoothly. And the program director usually comes, introduces himself or herself, and then they give a presentation about the program. In this presentation, they'll talk about what the program's motives are, what the schedule's like, and what's unique. This is where the program is trying to sell themselves to you, and they will talk about what's great about their program, and what makes them different from other programs, and make sure that this time, even though you're not directly interviewing, you can kind of stand out by like make sure you like maintain eye contact with the program director. Try to pay attention, and I don't know, think of whatever material they're putting across. If any of that can help you with your questions, which you're gonna ask in your interview, because at the end of every interview they do ask you like, do you have any questions? And it's nice if you can pick out some point from this presentation and then ask him, hey, I noticed you were speaking about this, so can you elaborate on this, or like, this is my interest, I want to know more about it, or pay attention to the presentation, because the reason I'm telling you this is it's like class at the end of the day, and like the first 2 times it's like okay, and then the third, fourth, fifth time you're like, my god, this is getting boring, and you'll start zoning out, and try to maintain focus during this presentation. So after this, normally some programs have like 2 people interviewing you, and some have like 3, 4. The maximum number of interviews that I went through was 4 interviews. Some interviews, so it isn't a hard and fast rule that a program director will interview you, because it's either some programs had like 2 interviews, whether it could be with the program director or a faculty or the APD. So it really depends, and programs have their own interview patterns, and a lot of times a lot of this information you can get from that Facebook forum. So just look that up, and if say for example you get an interview from I'm just randomly naming a program, if you get from UPMC Pinnacle program or whatever, any program, type that out and interview, and then see what their format is. Try to, or even post on the forum and ask, hey, has anyone gotten an interview from this place, and then speak to them, ask them what the interview pattern is like, prepare accordingly. It's always good to be well prepared, because you have that mental picture in your head, and it really helps. So I'll tell you also how this helps in a way. I was an observer at Maimonides, which is a hospital in Brooklyn in New York City, and they had 4 interviews as part of it, but 3 of them are interviews, and the 4th one is not actually an interview, but it's the program director will come and speak to you during this whole day at one point. And it's a random point where the program director will just come to you and say, hi, I'm Dr. Wolf. I mean, of course, he would have given you a presentation. So like he'll ask you what's your name, and then he would have read your application. I mean, he read our application and he knew everything about us, and then he'll act as though he's talking to you like it's some casual conversation he's making with you, but that's an interview and he's grading you. So I knew this because I was an observer at that program. So anybody and everybody who speaks to you during interview day could possibly be interviewing you, and it could be a resident, it could be a program director, because even residents do interview. And the funny thing is, a lot of times during your interview day, you will have residents walking in and out of the room. I mentioned to you that you'll be sitting in a room waiting for your interview turn, and you'll have residents walking in and out, and they'll just come, they'll sit down and be like, "Hi, I'm so and so person, I'm PGY2," and then they'll, "Where are you from?" And then they'll ask you a few questions, make conversation with you. God knows if that's an interview, because I knew I had inside information in this one program. But be careful, and anybody who speaks to you, speak to them as though it's an interview. Don't be extra formal if they're trying to be casual. But all I'm saying is, like just be at the top of your game. And also the program coordinator will be sitting a lot of times, like during this process, and regulating and making sure things go smoothly. I think they are interviewing you as well, in a way, like they're noticing every move of yours. And a lot of times it depends whether it's a big program or a small program. If it's a big program, then you'll have like 10 candidates, 15 candidates interviewing on the same day. If it's a small program, it's 3 or 4 people. Like at one of the programs that I got interviewed at, it was only 12 spots, and not one but 2 of the programs that I interviewed at were small, not small, but they didn't have too many slots. And it was just 3 or 4 of us during interview day, and every word that you say, like you're going to be sitting in a room with someone for 1 hour, and there are 2 or 3 other people. So you're going to be assessed significantly during that time frame. So yeah, that's something you should be careful about. That as soon as they say, I think I read it in that book where it said that even when you're in a 2 mile radius of the program, your interview has started. I mean, that's a bit of exaggeration, of course, but the point that the author was trying to get across was that the minute you wake up that day and the minute you go to sleep, you're interviewing. Like it could be like could be the the receptionist or whatever. So just make sure that you're bringing your A game right from the start to end. And this is something that I felt like I did wrong. At least during my second interview and maybe my fifth interview, was I was preoccupied. What I mean to say is, I was thinking of what my interview would be like and how that's gonna go about. So I didn't realize that I wasn't being mindful, and there were residents coming and speaking to me and leaving, and a lot of times I could tell myself that I was preoccupied, and I wasn't giving my 100% to that resident. And I think I don't think I should have done that. Like, that's something that I felt like I did wrong. I was always nervous, or not, I wouldn't say nervous, but I was preoccupied. And if you're nervous, then like it's gonna show. So, and it's gonna show to everybody over there, not just your interviewer, but everyone, like I told you, is keeping an eye on you. So I mean, I can't really tell you don't be nervous. All I can tell you is, when you go to America, like for interview season, try to speak to as many strangers as you can. Try to speak to everybody and anybody. Like I used to speak to the taxi guys just to initiate conversation and keep it going. Anybody, like if I was at a bar, I would just speak to some random person and make conversation. And honestly, I've made friends with people on the subway. I'm still in touch with like a couple of people that I met on the subway. I'm not even exaggerating. So I was doing all of this as a means to practice for my interviews, and to reduce my anxiety of speaking to strangers, and to be natural as a whole, like to come across that I'm a friendly person, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for friendly people, extroverted people, people who fit in. And you're gonna have to realize that we're going we're coming from India and we're going to the US. Now, they're obviously going to want to pick their own kind, right? Because they know that whoever's born and brought up in the US is familiar with US culture, and they're familiar with the US medical system. So why would they pick us? We're gonna have to stand out. We're gonna have to be significantly and interviews. Your USMLE scores reflect your medical knowledge. Interview seasons is just about an interview is just about to assess you as a person, and they want to see if you're a friendly person, and if you can actually get along and adapt to American culture more than anything. And American culture is to be friendly and animated, I would say. So try to like be American. I mean, I know it's wrong of me to say something like this, but you got to do it. And what I mean by this is like make eye contact with them. Hand movements are like really, body language is really important. Don't try to speak with an accent and make a fool of yourself. But like your English should be clear, and just practice as much as you can, and speak to as many Americans as you can, because the more you speak to Americans, the more you'll pick up traits from them, and the more natural it'll seem. And you can also try to keep your interviews to be like conversations as opposed to monologues. If they ask you a question, you speak for some time, and then try to let them speak as well, because someone, I can give you an example where in Texas, the interviewer asked me why Texas, and I said that I like the culture here. It's a little more laid back culture. I like space. I like big houses. And then I stopped, and then she asked me like where else, where did you do your clinical experience? And then I mentioned New York, and then we just kept talking about New York, and she kept taking the conversation in a direction. And like I because no one, whether it's an interview or not an interview, I know it's ironical that I'm saying this, but nobody wants to listen to someone speak all the time. They want to interact, and they want to get their point across, and have a conversation. So try to keep your interview going in that manner. Uh, this is about interview season as a whole, and it usually, like, you'll get your last interview maybe in December. Jan could be Jan as well. So just a few points that I want to highlight about interview season as a whole. One is that university programs like research. So if you want to ask research related questions, ask them in university programs. Don't irritate community programs with research oriented questions. If they are highlighting and they've mentioned to you that they are big in research and they like doing research, then go in that direction. But read up about a program before you go to the program, and read about every single aspect of that program. What's their board pass rate? Where do residents usually go after that? Because if you can like fit in that criteria and that profile, then they're gonna favor you. For example, if you see that like a program has a lot of the residents going into critical care or cardiology, then you can tell them. If they ask you where do you see yourself, 5 years from now, you should tell them that I see myself as a cardiologist. And then it's like what normally residents usually do after they finish residency from that program, because there are programs that favor certain fields as such. And I've been speaking a lot about cardiology because that was my experience, and that's a field that I'm hoping to get into, I would say. But read up. All I'm saying is be prepared for your interview. Also, don't speak to anybody about USMLE scores and clinical experience and interviews. What I'm trying to say is, don't sit during while you're waiting for interviews. Like, I mean, during your interview day, like when you're sitting in that common room with like 3 or 4, maybe 10 people, and you're waiting for your turn to go and interview. Don't ask someone, hey, what's your USMLE score? Or like ask them, how many interviews you got, man? Like all of those questions are a big no. You do something like that, and the program coordinator even notices it by mistake, you're done for, because that is a big no. Nobody speaks about things like that in the US. They don't speak about their personal matters such as USMLE scores, clinical experience. Yeah, of course, you can talk about like, I'm doing, research in this field, and then talk about your research, or you ask someone like, where are you staying? They'll say, I'm doing research at Yale, and you can speak to them about that. But don't ask them, how many interviews you got. Those are like big no questions, and I'm telling you, like IMGs do it. There was one interview where I was repeatedly asked by one candidate how many interviews I got, and where I've been getting interviews from, and how the interview season's going. And then he started telling me that interview season this year is going bad, and this was all while I was waiting to interview. And once a candidate spoke to me in Hindi, and that scared the living crap out of me, because I I was ignoring him, and at the same time, I couldn't speak to him in Hindi. So yeah, all of these things would happen, and all I'm saying is just be a friendly person, and don't overthink, and keep your conversations natural, and yeah. So communication during interview season is very important. What I mean to say is that before you go for an interview, you should be in touch with the program coordinator, and maybe or maybe not send thank you emails. But I don't think it's necessary to send them a thank you email as soon as they've extended an invite to you, because a lot of people had this question that, okay, say program Y sent me an interview invite, do I send an email saying thank you for giving me this opportunity? Well, honestly speaking, they need you as much as you need them. So it's a mutual relationship. You can always thank the program coordinator for like coordinating things as a whole, like for you can tell them that thank you for sending me this email, and I will be on this day, and just coordinate with the program like that. All of this doesn't make or break it, because like I told you, like if it's a big program, or they have like 300-400 people and interviewing, and they're not going to keep track of who has said what in their emails. In fact, Dr. Noel and Dr. Wolf were the two program directors who actually replied to me, and I didn't match into that program, and I matched into a program, but I didn't get any response from the program director or program coordinator. So to my thank you emails and my communication as a whole, so it doesn't reflect anything. It's just courtesy, and if you're courteous as a person, do it. If you're not courteous, don't try to make it artificial. Uh, and I think also sending thank you emails after interviews, that is also like a controversial topic. You can do it, you cannot do it. Do it if you have something significant to say. Like for me, for example, I had additional clinical experience after my interview. I interviewed, for example, on 15th November, and then I had 2 months of clinical experience after that. Plus, I had scheduled step 3 for Jan. So that was something that I wanted to get across to the program. So I said, hey, thank you for interviewing with me. It was really nice meeting you. I also want to mention to you that I have had additional clinical experience, and I've had, I've scheduled step 3 for so and so date. Like, try to come up with a valid excuse to get in touch with the program. But if a program tells you not to send a thank you email, and then you send a thank you email, you're doing something extremely stupid, because it reflects that you don't listen to instructions. Like if someone is telling you not to do something and then you go ahead and do it, it's going to cause you more harm than good. So that's something. Listen to instructions. That's all I'm saying. If they're saying no post-interview communication, then don't do post-interview communication. I've shared with you all a letter of intents and post-interview follow-up emails. You can use those as templates just to get a rough idea as to what it's like. Letter of intents you can send to programs even once you send in your application. Keep it very personal. If you're sending, for example, this is like, say you submit your application on September 15th, and then you send letter of intents on September 25th, doesn't help you. But on like October, November, that's a good, I would say late October, early November is a good time to start sending letter of intents, and catered letter of intents to that program. Don't just send, hey, I'm an IMG from India with this so-and-so score, and I think I'll be a good fit to your program. Can you give me an interview? That's not going to help you, because everyone's sending something like that. On the other hand, if you send someone an email saying, I've lived in Brooklyn for like 6 months, I have a good idea of what Brooklyn is like, I have an interest in rheumatology, and your hospital is known for rheumatology, and I published so and so paper in rheumatology, and I've had clinical experience in New York, and I have family in this area. My father's brother stays 10 minutes from the hospital. So all of those details, if you can put in, and also like look into the program and see what kind of residents they prefer, and then try to put across your personality in that way. So that might help you. Letter of intents didn't help me at all. I didn't get a single interview by sending letter of intents. During interview season on the Facebook forum, you'll see a lot of discussions about letter of intents, and people will be debating about it all the time. So send it. If you just do your best. So my mantra was, I'm going to give my 100% to interview season, and I that's why I sent out letter of intents regularly, and to almost all programs that I applied to, I did end up sending letter of intents. So do it. I would say, like, you're not gonna it's not gonna harm you in any way. It's just effort, and you might or might not benefit from it. No one can really tell you. Um, I think that's a good amount, and I hope I've been able to paint a picture of what interview season is like. Um, it's that how many interviews you get and how many interviews is a safe number to get. It depends on program to program. You should be analyzing the data online regarding that. All I can tell you is that since I applied for internal medicine, I know internal medicine statistics in and out, and I also vaguely know pediatrics, pathology, psychiatry, and the fields which we IMGs match into. Um, I know people with more than 10 interviews who went unmatched, and I'm not making this up. And I know more number of people with one or two interviews who ended up matching. So there is no hard and fast rule. But the general saying is that they rank 7 out of the 10 candidates that they interview. So in my previous video, I said that they interviewed 10 candidates for one spot, and they rank 7 out of 10. Now, you need to understand the NRMP matching algorithm to understand what your chances are of matching. It does not mean that your chances of matching, if you get 7 interviews, 100%. It's that they rank candidates from, say, 1 to 150 based on your performance. It's not a subjective, assessment, I would say. What I mean to say is that programs don't just interview you and say, hey, I like this guy, let's rank him high. They have a objective scorecard during interview day where they've given you points for certain things. Whether your pre-interview dinner or your interview day had you've been scored based on all of this. Plus, this is only about 30 or 40, maybe even 50%. It depends on the program. They also score you based on your CV and your USMLE scores. So, like, if you've got like 230, then they give you maybe like plus 5. If you've got 240, they might give you plus 7. If you've got 250, they might give you plus 10. So, they give you scores based on your USMLE. Every program has its own criteria, but every program has a criteria. And this is an objective criteria, an objective score that you receive. Once you receive the score, then you're ranked based from 1 to how many ever candidates there are. Like, if you go from, say, 150, if they have 150, if they've interviewed 150 people, then they'll rank, a certain number, maybe 100 or maybe, depends. It's usually 1 in 7. And if they've ranked like 100 and then you've ranked that program high, then you match into that program. If both of you all have ranked each other high. And so like your chances of matching really depend on, like, if you've been ranked really high in one program, and you just need one interview to match into a program. So there's no definitive number that you need. As such, I got 6 interviews. I know for a fact that internal medicine, even though it says 7, but a lot of people, it says the average number of ROL is 7, but the average specialty is ranked at 1.2, which means, say, people who have matched into internal medicine had 7 programs on their rank order list, but not all 7 of them were internal medicine. It could have been pediatrics, family medicine, or some other field. So 7 divided by 1.2 is 5, which goes to say that in 2019, the year which was before me, a candidate with 5 interviews was almost certain to match. But then again, if you do something stupid in all your interviews, it really depends on that. Also, remember that looking for the best fit. They're not looking for the best candidate. So don't always try to oversell yourself. Try to fit into that program. What I mean to say is try to cater your interview to that program. Speak to people, ask them what they're looking for. Some programs might ask you medical questions. These are the smaller community programs like Harlem Hospital. I was staying in Brooklyn, and my roommate had interviewed at Harlem, and they asked her medical questions. And I think the program is a malignant program. It's known to be a bad program, and it's usually these bad programs where they ask you like medical questions, or they ask you like they ask you where else have you been interviewing, or like they ask you like what's your dad's salary. They ask some really weird questions. So it's unlikely that a good program or even a decent program would ask you such questions. They usually try to analyze your personality, go through the most commonly asked questions. I've shared a document with you. Look up the Facebook forum as well, and prepare for interview season. Yeah, I hope like this video was helpful. In the next video, I'm going to talk about. The next video is going to be a little more personal because I'm going to talk about how to make your rank order list, and my experience with the programs that I interviewed at. So if you wanna, I don't think it's gonna help you all that much, but it's gonna be more personal experience. So you can skip the next video if you don't wanna know, if you don't wanna get tips on how to make your rank order list and what helped me match into the program that I matched into. Yep. So see you guys.